You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So Syracuse basketball in the Legends Classic on Thursday and Friday unfortunately dropped both of its games. They were both close losses to two very good teams. Syracuse lost to Texas 70-66. At one point they had a lead, actually multiple points in the second half. They had a lead, but they just could not close the deal. And against Texas Tech the following night on Friday, they lost 79-74. They didn't really lead much at all. They kind of were always just a step behind Texas Tech. But again, they were very competitive. And that's why I'll say later on that I actually feel better after the two losses than I did after the three wins. We'll get to that later on in the podcast. But let's talk about what is not here for Syracuse basketball right now. It just hasn't shown up this season. And that's the three-point shooting. And it is the main culprit as to why Syracuse lost both of these games. If you caught the post-game reaction I had against Texas, I said the main reason Syracuse lost was the free throw shooting. But the free throw shooting corrected itself the next night against Texas Tech. So I was looking at themes for Syracuse and why they lost both. And the one that sticks out is three-point shooting. Let's go over it, okay? Against Texas, Syracuse was 5 of 21 from the three-point line. And against Texas Tech, they were 6 of 21. Combined, that's 11 for 42. That's not very good. That is 26%. So they didn't shoot the ball well in the Legends Classic, but is it just a case of, hey, they were cold for a couple nights? Not necessarily. The entire team is cold right now. For the season, okay? This is an alarming trend that we have to be wary of here, and hopefully it can correct itself going forward. Syracuse hasn't gotten hot from deep. Lemoyne, 4 of 22, 18%. Colgate, they were 8 of 23, which is 35%. That's been their best shooting game of the season. 8 of 23, which is 35%. Not exactly the greatest. It's not bad, but not the greatest. And if that's your best shooting output of the season, that's not very good. And Youngstown State, they were 5 of 22, which is 23%. The three-point shots for Syracuse, they're not falling right now. That's the reality. It's been 5 games, and they're not shooting well from deep. And they really haven't in any game this season. So what's the problem? What's the issue? The guys that are expected to shoot the ball well for Syracuse are not shooting the ball well. Coach Adrian Autry said prior to this season that he expects that this team is going to be a good shooting team. And so far, as the stats say, it has not been a good shooting team. It starts with Chris Bell. Let's talk about Chris Bell, okay? Bell last season, why did we hype him up so much heading into this year? Well, he shot 42% from the three-point line last year, which was second in the ACC. He is the team's best shooter, like it or not. But right now, he's not shooting well. 28% through the first 5 games of this season. That's not good. That's not good enough for Chris Bell. It's not good enough really for anyone's standards, let alone Chris Bell, who was 42% last season. And he's missing shots he normally makes in his sleep. I mean, the big one, obviously, was against Texas Tech at the very end of the game where he has a chance to make it a 2-point game with about a minute to go. After making a great defensive play in transition, he misses a wide open corner 3. That's a shot that Chris Bell usually makes, but it's just not going in right now. It was a wide open look. I think it was a good shot selection. Not going to complain about that. And he's your team's best shooter. You want him shooting in that scenario, and he didn't knock it down. Now, I know a lot of people are thinking to themselves, well, sit Chris Bell. He's a one-trick pony. Actually, he's not a one-trick pony this season. I want to point this out. He has improved in other aspects of the game, particularly on offense. He's putting the ball down on the floor more. His efficiency from 2 has gone up so much from last season. And as a result, he is still scoring at an effective rate. He's averaging 15 points per game despite shooting 28% from the three-point line. So he's not a one-trick pony, at least on offense. Does he drive you crazy at times with his defense? Yes. And also his rebounding when he fails to box out a player. Obviously, it's maddening and it makes you upset. but he's not a one-trick pony, at least anymore on offense. But they need Chris Bell to get going. In order for this team to be at least a decent three-point shooting team, they need Chris Bell to be where he was last season, 40% or higher. Right now, he's at 28%. That is a huge issue right now with Syracuse. It is. Now, what are the alternatives besides Chris Bell? I see a ton of people in the comment section saying, we got to sit Chris Bell. That's what we got to do. To that, I say, well, who else on the team is shooting well? Who else on the team can space the floor? Because I'll give you the percentages of the other guys on Syracuse who are supposed to be decent shooters, guys who can shoot the ball from three. And I'll give you their percentages right now. J.J. Starling, he's actually having a good year. He's 31% from the three-point line. Could be better. Could be a lot better, but I guess also could be worse. But that's 31%. Donnie Freeman, we've hyped him up as someone who can score all three levels on the floor. What does that mean? He can score inside, he can score in the mid-range, and he can score from three. He's 20% to start this season. Choppa Moore. We all love Choppa Moore, right? I think we should maybe even start him. Him and J.J. Starling in the backcourt, right? He's shooting 20%. Lucas Taylor, 14%. Jaquan Carlos, 13%. So as much as Chris Bell might drive you insane, they just need him to get out of the funk that he is in from the three-point line. They have to. They need him to. Because how much faith do you have in the other players on this team to shoot the ball well? I guess I'm confident that J.J. Starling can raise his three-point percentage to maybe 35% this season. Are Donnie and Choppa this bad from the three-point line? Probably not. But at this point in the game right now, I don't know if they're necessarily elite shooters just yet. Taylor and Carlos are not going to shoot 14 and 13% for the season, but I don't think they're going to be particularly great either. They need Chris Bell to get out of the funk he is in. That's the reality. And the only way you do that is you got to play him. You got to keep playing him and just hope that he can shoot the ball well from deep going forward. So that's the major issue right now with Syracuse. They are not shooting the ball well from three. The guys who are supposed to shoot well from three are not. Eddie Lampkin actually has the highest three-point percentage at 1-for-1. That's the issue. They're not shooting the ball well from deep. And who knows? They win at least one of the two games if they shoot the ball decent from deep. That's the reality. So, Syracuse basketball went 0-2 this weekend in the Legends Classic. They were close. They were very competitive against two very good teams. But the common theme between those two teams is that the three-point ball, it wasn't falling, and it hasn't been falling this season. And they need Chris Bell to shoot a lot better than 28%. Otherwise, this team isn't going anywhere. Okay? Three-point shooting right now isn't there. Hopefully it can eventually even itself out in a positive way, positive regression.